Hey out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to episode number 124 of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast, brought to you by me, your host, Mac B. the Wolf. And I will be joined, as always, by my partner in crime from the East Coast of the U.S., Gary Action Jackson. And I want to give a shout out to everyone who listened to our last episode on Marillion's Script for a Jester's Tear. Look, Marillion is one of those bands that we just didn't really know much about. It's somebody we kind of heard of, but we never really listened to them before, and they didn't have any big hits in America when we were growing up. In fact, they had no hits in America when we were growing up, so we didn't have any real familiarity with them. But as this show is kind of about me being an American expat living in London and learning more about UK bands that maybe we didn't learn about in America, maybe they didn't hit as big in the States as they did on the other side of the pond, I just thought it would be a good idea to explore Script for a Jester's Tear as it was turning 40. We have a lot of prog fans in our network, a lot of prog listeners, so I figured, hey, let's give it a shot. And we did it with an amazing artist, Jimmy Madden, who is doing gigs around England right now. He's trying to work his way to America, but you can go to jimmymadden.com and follow him on all the different social media outlets there. He's doing really well. He just had a great month on Spotify, as I saw on Twitter there. So definitely follow Jimmy and learn about his music, but take what he said to heart and listen to some of Script for a Jester's Tear. I think you'll be rewarded for that. In fact, I got a great note via Twitter by one of our regular listeners, goes by the handle Moving On 2660850, and we've talked with him before, said, hey, Ugly Werewolf, I had heard of Marillion, but never explored their music until now. Thoroughly enjoy your review as I listen via YouTube track by track. Musicianship is top-notch, and some of the songs immediately remained in my head. Thanks for challenging us. Well, thank you, Moving On, for your comments. And yeah, it was a challenge for us too. This is not a band we knew very well. This is not an album we'd ever heard before, let alone had listened to a lot as kids and loved. So it was a bit of a challenge for us to explore something new, and that's why we enlisted Jimmy. But hopefully it turned some folks on to Marillion, and that's really what it's all about, sharing our passion for rock and roll and exploring new things, at least stuff that is new to us, even though it's 40 years old. And speaking of listeners, I was really pleased and excited to meet a young listener when I was down in Florida this past week, a young man named Rex, who isn't even quite in high school yet, but he's a big metalhead. He has a couple of bands on his own. He's an accomplished musician and a graphic artist, and he actually knew who we were. Look, we know what our demographics are. We're 50 years old. We figure everybody listening to our show is about the same age, maybe a little older, maybe a little younger, but kind of in our demographic, who remembers listening to a lot of this stuff from growing up. But this is a young man who loves rock and roll, loves heavy metal, is a talent in his own right, and we spent about an hour talking together about what he liked about the show and what he was into. So I thank you, Rex, for being a fan. I thank you for listening to the show, and I thank you for carrying the torch forward for rock and roll. One of the reasons we do this show is so we can celebrate these albums and make sure they don't fade into obscurity, also to interview rock stars who are starting to fade from the earth as well. And hopefully we'll get some more interviews here in the next couple of months that we're excited about. But thank you, Rex, and thank you to everyone in the younger generation who still listens to rock and roll. Now, on today's episode, we're doing an American band. We're not doing an English band for the first time in a bit. We're doing an American band who is huge, one of the biggest American rock bands of all time, and one that was a huge influence on us as we were growing up, and that's Van Halen, as we're coming up on the 35th anniversary of OU812, their 8th album, and second with Sammy Hagar as lead singer. And this was much anticipated. After the 5150 album, their first with Sammy after the change from David Lee Roth, 5150 did very well, had a lot of catchy songs, had some hits, but it was very synthed out, and people were a little bit upset with that, saying, hey, why isn't he playing the keyboard? Why isn't he playing the guitar? Why is the ultimate guitar god sitting on the keyboards? So when OU812 came out, I feel like they may have listened to some of those critics. They still definitely have some synths and keyboards in there, but it seemed like they did return to some more riffing and some really great Eddie magic, while still maintaining their pop sensibilities. When It's Love was still a huge hit for them. Feels So Good was a big hit for them in America, big MTV hit. Finish What You Started may not have been a classic Van Halen song as far as the style of the song goes, but it was a huge hit for them. They did very well. But in some ways, they returned to some harder rock roots. And in some ways, they kind of got away from it. It's an interesting one. They couldn't have been bigger. They headlined the Monsters of Rock tour over Scorpions, Metallica, Dokken, and Kingdom Come. So they really were about the biggest hard rock band in the world at that point. But I don't know if this one has aged all that well. So we're going to kind of dig into that on this show. Before we do that, though, we got to do a little bit of business. As usual, we have to mention that we are proud members of the Pantheon Podcast Network, a network of about 100 great shows on all musical genres. There's something in there for everybody. You can follow them at Pantheon Pods. But we also like to give shout-outs to folks who we've had on our show or we've guested on their show, like Jay from The Hook Rocks, or Paul Stevenson from This Day Rocks and Vintage Rock Pod, like Christy Alexander Hallberg of Rock Is Lit, Martin Popoff of History in 5 Songs, Tom and Zeus, the Kiss Kings, who are just wrapping up their ultimate Kiss bracket as I record this, of the Shout It Out Loud cast, and of course the CEO, Christian Swain of Rock and Roll Archaeology. But our old friend Sonny Pooney of Growing Up Rock, he and Steve and Michael have joined the Pantheon podcast family. So we welcome you there, boys. We're glad to have you on board. There's some other great folks who have just joined, and so you have to go to Pantheon Pods or pantheonpodcast.com to see who some of those folks are. Great podcasters. They have great guests. They have great topics. Of course, Sonny was our guest last year as we reviewed Whitesnake's 1987 album, and we're hopeful to have Sonny on here again really soon. And of course, we have to mention our incredible sponsor, rarevinyl.com. Look, guys, I know a lot of you are record collectors. Rarevinyl.com has over 250,000 items in stock. They have a 5-star rating from Trustpilot, and I've been to their warehouse. I've met their people. They take great care of all this amazing rock, and it's not just rock and roll. They have an amazing collection of records, posters, 12-inch singles, CDs, DVDs, point-of-sale record store displays, all sorts of amazing stuff in there. You go to rarevinyl.com, find something that you love, and then use code podcast. You can save 10%. Look, they ship all over the world, so I don't care if you're in Alaska or Australia. You're looking for that special Van Halen album, or maybe it's Marillion from the last show. Whatever you're into, go to rarevinyl.com or EIL.com and use the code podcast. It'll save you 10%. They'll ship it to you in great shape, and then you get on their list. So if you're always looking for something, some things come in and out of stock. Some things are hard to find, but when they get it back in, you can get an alert so you know when that priceless treasure you want is available. So go to rarevinyl.com, guys. Great folks there. Now back to Van Halen. Yeah, this kind of coincided in a time in my life that was interesting. It was when I was in high school and I was discovering hard rock, and I was very into Led Zeppelin, and I was very into the old school Rolling Stones, and getting into Rush. And then Van Halen had the credibility of being MTV darlings from 1984. But then I'd also discovered the first Van Halen album. So I knew them as both, as this cool hard rocking band, but also as this pop band. And now they have this new lead singer who has a little bit more vocal range and can also play the guitar. So OU812 was a big deal. I remember my friends and I getting it and listening to it and having it with us constantly during 1988 and 89. And so that's why Jackson and I are going to review it here ahead of its 35th anniversary. So sit back, folks. On episode 124, we're getting into Van Halen's OU812 right here on The Wolf. Okay, time for a little experimentation. We'll see if how we sound together on the same mic for the first time. And it's been a long time since we tried this.
I don't think we've ever tried one mic. We tried it out of the computer one time, so to make sure that we get the same level and are not butting heads.
That's right. But I'm glad we're here face to face for once. And we're going to talk about what was one of our very favorite bands, especially when we first met. I mean, in high school, I've easily put Van Halen in my top 5 favorite bands ever, maybe top 3 at some point. I always talk how it's the Stones, Led Zeppelin, Rush have been top 3 forever. But there may have been a time when Van Halen was in the top 3.
Absolutely. And especially at this time when we met, this was the latest Van Halen record. For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge had not come out yet, I don't think, right?
I don't know. I thought it came out in the summer before we went.
Oh, you know what? I
to college because I think
right.
Pound Cake was already out.
Yeah,
and it was the first concert we ever saw together. Because I got tickets living in Jacksonville for Orlando, and Alice in Chains opened for them, and they were not selling T-shirts. in the arena because the arena wanted too much of a take, so they're just like, nope, we're just not going to sell them. But I remember we were so psyched about it, man. Like, we're going to see Van Halen, and we had the Van Halen poster on the wall, and he's still revered as about the greatest rock guitarist in the whole world at that point. You know, they were still, and I know their song off that album was Standing on Top of the World, but I mean, that's where they were, man. They were rock gods.
Yeah. And still a point yet where grunge had not taken over yet. And I think even when it did, it almost seemed like Van Halen had enough armor on them, had enough pedigree where they kind of fought that off and were still big even through grunge. Well, the early 91, 92 anyway.
Yeah, because I mean, Nirvana had just hit. Yeah, they were with Alice in Chains, but Alice in Chains really only had the Man in the Box. They may have had one of their EPs out at some point, but the Man in the Box was what had made them big. And so, you know, they didn't have Dirt out yet. I don't think they had Jar of Flies out quite yet. They were still, I mean, an opening act is probably where they belonged at that point, right, as far as the amount of material they had. And yeah, and obviously at this point, there were people who had chosen the Sammy or the Dave camp.
Yeah. Yes, there definitely were, but I didn't think at that point in time, to me, as long as they were putting out music, I was fine with it. I knew, I didn't think there was any way Dave was ever coming back.
Right.
So if this is what we were going to get, then fine, let's do it. It wasn't exactly the same, but it still fit, and I still liked it.
Yeah, and it's, you know, like a lot of the bands that we were into or that we like, well, we liked Led Zeppelin. Well, you weren't going to get Led Zeppelin ever again, you know. You weren't going to get the Beatles ever again, you know. You got the Stones, but that's pretty sporadic as far as they don't tour every single year, like even though they kind of started to about 20 years ago. But we were just happy. There were no more Who, basically. You know, a lot of the bands that we liked weren't coming back. So, yes, and Van Halen had that. They had both. They had the killer rock stuff to give them that cred. But they also, because of growing up with MTV, 1984 was huge on MTV. So they had the pop thing going too, right? So, yeah, for the hardcore rockers, they made sense. For the people who were just into pop music, they made sense. So they had a lot of credibility, and they'd already gone through the thing with Sammy replacing Dave on 5150 a couple of years before OU812 came out, right?
Right. So the initial weirdness of how was this going to go was over. They had one album. It did well. I think it was, 5 or 6 million?
6 million, 5150, yeah, in America.
So that was big. They cemented themselves as a new incarnation of the band. So, yeah, I was excited when this record came out to see what it was going to be.
I was excited. Well, and here's the other thing, too. Obviously, I knew them from 1984 and a couple other songs. But it was right around this time that this album comes out is when I discovered Van Halen 1, the first album.
Okay.
Like, I'd never heard Eruption. And then after I heard it, I'm like, oh my God, my life changed drastically at that point. So it's like, okay, I already knew this band. They were cool from the early MTV days when I was a kid just learning about music. Then I find that they've got some killer stuff from before that time that's mind-blowing, that's so good, that's earth-shatteringly changes your life. And then this comes out, right? So then I'm like, okay, now I know it's the best of both worlds, right? It's stuff I liked as a kid, but it's also hardcore heavy metal stuff that I can like as a burgeoning metalhead.
And even though this was more on the synth side, it was still, to me, this one still rocked hard enough to not turn me off to the band, to keep the momentum going and want to hear more from what they were putting out.
All right, so that's kind of what the issue is. I mean, yes, the singer changes. A lot of people always have an issue. It's not the same guy. And I get it, and the voices are going to be different, right? But you have to take into account that not only were the voices different, but you went from this guitar god kind of guy with the lead singer who's more the entertainer than the vocal talent, right? He's more the front man. But 5150 did incorporate a heck of a lot of synths in there, and not that you didn't hear a little bit of that on 1984 with songs like I'll Wait and stuff like that, but it was all over 5150, and it wasn't just, hey, that guy's not Dave, but they've gone soft, there's too much synth in there. And Eddie always had to say, it's me playing the synth. It's me programming it in. What do you want from me?
So the other thing is, we already had the Crazy from the Heat and Eat 'Em and Smile from Mr. David Lee Roth. And while he had an absolute killer lineup in that band, that album really wasn't that great. It really was. So if you were going to split between the two camps, I was definitely in the Van Halen camp.
Yeah, you follow the talent, right? And
Correct.
Dave, what's he do as soon as he goes solo? California Girls. Like, they did all these covers in Van Halen, especially on Diver Down. You listen to our Diver Down episode where half the record is covers. Yeah, he's not a great songwriter. And he is an amazing singer. Now, it's very tongue-in-cheek. It's very entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And to see him live is probably a blast. And I have seen him live with Van Halen and his come-over when Michael was no longer welcome in the band and Wolfie was probably 70 pounds lighter at that point. But, he's a great entertainer. There's no doubt about it. But he's not an amazing singer, and he songwriting is not his forte either. So they welcome Sammy in. It does awesome 5150. And you can't deny, for me personally, Live Without a Net in New Haven, Connecticut, was huge, especially since I got it on cassette and I could ride around it with my car or put it in the boombox. And I'm like, would you listen to all that cool stuff? And when you hear his whole solo, Eddie's whole solo, it's got part of 316, which hadn't been put on for Uncle Carnal Knowledge yet. You hear part of Mean Streets, you hear Cathedral, you hear Eruption, all is one thing. Like, gosh, that's so amazing. He really is the greatest electric guitar player in the world.
And I think at that point in time, the Live Without a Net, I had never seen him play before. Mm-hmm. So to watch him, how he played the different things that you heard a million times, that was awesome. And just to see the band play, I don't believe that there was another live performance that I remember seeing before that.
No, and their first live record was Right Here, Right Now Live with Sammy after For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, right? So we'd all been kind of waiting for an official. Obviously, in California, there's tons of boots around, lots of cassettes available. I'm talking about like an official live album. It didn't exist. But, 5150 did 6 times platinum in the U.S., 3 times platinum in Canada, double platinum in Australia. It did very well. Dreams hit the Billboard Hot 100. Love Walks In hit the Hot 100. Why Can't This Be Love went to number 3. Mm-hmm. So those are some pretty big hits. So okay, well, the next one's going to be just as big, just as good. And I feel like maybe they started to listen to their critics a little bit.
Okay.
On this one.
Okay, and why would you say that?
It's not that there's no synths on OU812, because there still are. Mm. But it sounds to me like they're trying to do some more heavy riffing in certain places, and they're letting Eddie go in a few places. But I don't know. Compared to 5150, I don't know if I like this one as well.
I would agree with you on that. I think that the songwriting on 5150 is better. There are a couple of, and we'll get to this, but there are a couple of tracks on here that I think are just kind of filler. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I remember thinking about watching Live Without a Net is I would have been upset in 1980, what was that, 6? Mm-hmm. Paying money to see Eddie play the keyboards a lot of the time. Like I know he's always got the guitar with him, right? But he plays a lot, and Sammy plays a lot on the guitar. Sammy's a great guitar player. He is, but that's not what I paid to see.
Exactly, and that's another thing. It's like, okay, so now there's another guitar player in the band. Cool, now we're going to get more riffing and stuff like that. But it doesn't really work out that way. It's not like Sammy holds down the riff while Eddie goes. It's more like Eddie goes, and then Sammy gets a turn, and then Eddie gets a turn. I'm like, well, okay. It's not quite Iron Maiden trading or Judas Priest or something like that. It adds another dimension.
Well, now that's an interesting thought because you mentioned Iron Maiden, you mentioned Priest. Those are probably the 2 biggest bands for us that have a twin lead guitar. Yeah, it's a lot harder than you think to get them both to play back and forth and together. What I remember seeing is Sammy playing the kind of the lead, not lead part, but like the rhythm part, the main riff, and then Eddie is just kind of like riffing, and he doesn't really know what to do because he's like, what do I just noodle the whole time? Exactly. He needs to play riff, solo, back to riff, a little bit. Like he needs to handle all of it. With him left to his own devices, it's just noodle. Yeah, exactly. So he kind of needs to have some directions, like you have to play this. Correct. You have to kind of keep it all together there. Yeah. And it's like, remember that Judas Priest, I think it was Metalworks VHS that we had back in the day, when they're talking about the Turbo album, like it had the computerized chug of ZZ Top. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what this sounds, what some of this sounds like to me. And it's a little later than that, so you'd think they would have learned from that. Right. But apparently not. So 88 was like Iron Maiden's doing Seventh Son, which is very synth up. Mm-hmm. Judas Priest is doing Ram It Down. Is that right? By that point? That would be 88, correct.
Because Painkiller didn't come out to the 90 or 91 or something like that. So So that's kind of where metal or hard rock, I would not call Van Halen metal. They're too pop for that, but it's kind of where hard rock was. And then, Hysteria's all over the place in 87 and 88 and 89. Bon Jovi.
Yeah, that was 87.
Slippery When Wet was 87. So these are the leaders, and that's who Van Halen is with or against. So I don't know if you can blame the band so much as you can blame the times. Plus, they didn't really have that Ted Templeman with them, right?
So Ted, what was it, 1984, and then he was out for 5150.
Mm-hmm.
So now this is the second album without, his hand on the rudder, basically telling them what to do. No, I won't say telling them what to do, but more just kind of pushing them in the right direction.
Right, and I think Don Landy, who was their engineer, eventually got a producer's credit for it because of the work he did. But he's like, basically, we're producing it ourselves. I'm like, okay, sometimes that's a good idea, and sometimes it isn't. Ted seemed to be the guy for them. They had incredible success. Although, I know charting doesn't always mean the same stuff. And 1984 and the first Van Halen album have outsold the Sammy albums, but none of the David Lee Roth albums went to number one. All the Sammy albums went to number one.
Correct. So...
Now, 1984 went to number two. I don't think it could get over Thriller, which doesn't make it different from a lot of albums that came out from 1983 to 1984. But yeah, and I'll admit to you this, I hadn't listened to this all the way through since high school.
I would be in the same boat. This is a long record. I think this is 60-something minutes long, where a lot of Van Halen records come in the 40-ish.
Right. Well, yeah, I think you're right. These songs are a little bit longer. And I didn't realize at the time that the 10th song, Apolitical Blues, which was a cover, Little Feat cover, that was a quote-unquote bonus track for CDs. I only bought it on CD. I didn't know anybody who had it on cassette. So, at the time, that was fairly common practice, but I didn't kind of realize it. But it was also a B-side, and we'll get to it. It doesn't fit with anything else on the record.
No, but it is kind of a cool B-side 10th track. The other thing that was weird about this one, they were in alphabetical order on the back, not in track order.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, and it was confusing. Like, wait a minute. I'm trying to follow along, and this isn't going well.
But you can't hear a lot of bass, I feel like, on this record. And this could have been...
Or the wheels starting to come off here.
Yeah, the whole we don't like Michael Anthony thing, to me that started about 20 years ago, or 20, something like that. Otherwise, Mikey was always like, oh, no, we love him, and he does our backing stuff, and he's our brother, he's got the Jack Daniels bass, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden, he was persona non grata, and I feel like they're just making room for Wolfie, and there's got to be a scapegoat, it's because we don't like Mike. But the way he's drowned out, I don't know, maybe they were already starting to nudge him, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I know that all tracks are credited to the entire band, but that's what came out later, is they basically said he didn't write anything. Even though there's something on here that he says that he programmed at least the synth track for. So I don't know. Come on. He's been with you how long? I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Michael Anthony. What's the problem?
I know. And it even says here, there's speculation that the thin presence of bass may have been related to the Van Halen brothers' growing animosity, and later years not only would be forced out of the band, but his songwriting credits are removed or altered. I guess that's on new releases, but that's not cool. That's not cool. But they didn't love it. Years later, Eddie says, sonically it was shit. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, maybe you should have had a producer then, Ed.
This is Sunny Hollywood Pooney, and you are listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast. Why? Somebody has to.
Our buddy, Martin Popoff, who was it episode number 102 or 103, talking about Blue Oyster Cult, he called it his cynical corporate rock and found the album overproduced and more commonplace than 5150. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ouch, Martin.
Yeah.
But people wanted to not like Van Halen after Dave left, I felt. I think it was like that was the in vogue things, like you go to the Dave side. Even with Airheads, the Adam Sandler and Brendan Fraser movie, it was like, who'd you take in the Van Halen David Lee Roth? He's like, Van Halen's like, he's a cop. It's like they sold a lot of albums after Dave left. But I was with you. I'm like, I'm going with the band. I'm going with the brand. I'm going with the legendary guitar player than just the guy who can do high kicks with his shirt off. That seemed like an easy choice to me.
And the other thing too was that for every kind of bad feeling that people had about Roth, because that was the thing in 1985, was that he couldn't get along with the band. He was too big for his britches, so he left. You bring in Sammy, who had this huge. Well, he was with Montrose before. Then he does his own solo records.
Right.
And again, he's just a great guy. Like, he just comes in and it's his band and they're all together. And
right.
Yeah, it just seemed like, who am I going to side with? Dave doing his own thing.
The wackadoo.
Right. And even that was never another band either. Like, it was always David Lee Roth or the David Lee Roth band. So you knew what was going on there.
That's right.
As far as who was calling the shots.
Now, he had great videos. They're very entertaining,
Correct.
Did you lose some weight? No, I gained 80 pounds. It's great MTV stuff. I know that they loved him there. But, did you hear Sensible Shoes? Because that sucked. Sorry, Dave. But even Robert Christgau, the Village Voice, who he railed on them after 5150, like how horrible it was. But he's like, this is better. It's like, it's a record of clear professionalism or barely discernible inspiration, but it's not both. Whatever. It said trading Dave for Sammy wrecked their shot of being the Led Zeppelin of the 80s. But Sammy, hey, wow, man. If the new boy doesn't own them, then you can't deny he defines them. Interesting. Interesting take on that. Again, this is creating soap opera nonsense. I'm like, just listen to the music. And a lot of Dave music was amazing, but Dave's not writing that music. Billy Sheehan and Stevie Vai are doing the heavy lifting there.
Right.
So I don't know.
Well, and then on the other side, Sammy comes in and writes all the songs. Like, he might not write them by himself, but he's got his hand. It's not like he just came in and sang them.
That's right.
He is the leader of this band now.
All right, so let's jump into it now.
Okay.
Start off with Mine All Mine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I loved this song back in the day, and listening to it again, I still do. I was surprised it wasn't a single. I thought it was really awesome. It comes out. Now it's got a little bit of that computer chug thing going on to begin. I know, but I still like it. I don't know. The synth is occupying a lot of the space here, but still, as a good opening album track, I dig it.
Yeah. This is one of those tracks where you buy the album and you say, yeah, the same thing. Why was this not a single? This is great. And not a whole ton of people know this. I don't think it was ever on a greatest hits.
No.
I think they kind of just forgot all about these albums once Dave came back.
And they didn't play a ton from this either after, certainly on the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge tour, they didn't play a ton. They played the hits.
Right.
Now, I know at this point, what is this, their 8th album? So if you only get maybe 2 or 3 songs per record or something like that. Not to mention, Sammy didn't like to play a ton of the Dave stuff. Like, didn't play Jump, on this tour. I'm like, you're not going to play Jump, dude. Jump is a huge hit. You have to play Jump. He likes Panama, but he doesn't like to sing Jumps. I'm like, okay. But, look, the classic ooh, and the harmonies, and that is Michael Anthony. Mm-hmm. And I know Eddie's in there too, and Sammy's probably in there too, but that's also signature of Van Halen's sound.
Right.
And that's another reason why I don't get why they're always denigrating Mike, because he had a lot to do with, maybe he didn't write, didn't write it, but the sound he's a part of.
Correct. And this was good too, because you got to be real careful with the old whammy bar dump at the beginning of the solo.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it sounds really cool. He doesn't overuse it. It's a little different. This is a really cool track. I like this.
I love the solo. It's like, it's great. They're back. All right, cool. It's still got a lot of that, synthy computer stuff in it, but that's okay. We're off and running now. Mm-hmm. Here we go. Yep. Woohoo! All right. Then we go to When It's Love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a hit, I suppose.
It was the first single. Yes.
Was it the first single?
I think
so.
Well, that's the one that's the one I remember hearing first. So let's check this out.
Okay, no, this is going to throw you off.
Uh-oh.
It was the first single we heard. Apparently, Black and Blue was released as a single in May. of 88. Now, I didn't know that. It was released, the album's May 20th, 1988 in the U.S. So maybe Black and Blue was kind of the pre-single. You know, a lot of times they'll tease it 2 or 3 weeks out, like, here's the new one. And then it didn't go anywhere. It's like, okay, well, let's go back to the Love song. Yeah. And then, When It's Love does well. And I remember the video being in pretty heavy rotation on MTV.
Yeah.
But number 5 on the Hot 100. Number 1, mainstream rock. It's always good to be number 1 in America.
Yeah.
Number 28 in the UK, Cabo Wabo was the B-side. But again, what are we starting with? Boom, 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 keyboard, man. And the riffs are thin.
Yeah.
The guitar is thin on here, man.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Like I said, I remember this being the lead single. And so, the new album's out. Here comes the new single. What are we doing here? This isn't the hard rocker that I would like. I don't know what this is. I really didn't understand the whole Michael Anthony dynamic at that point in time. I thought there was a woman in the back. I didn't think a man could sing that.
With that high voice,
yes, Yes, I know that he can.
That na.
Right.
Yeah.
That and he goes way high. He can go higher than Sammy can.
Yeah.
And it's a little disconcerting.
More big choruses, that's right. It's very catchy.
Correct.
Ladies like it. There's nothing wrong with having a tune that the ladies like. We've still got Eruption, running with the devil in our back pocket. Ain't talking about love. We got that. So, we get something to get the ladies in. That's cool. I always kind of like what Al did on this one. I don't know, just some signature stuff from Al. There's a little guitar flash here.
Yeah, very.
But not a lot.
That was the other thing, too, that I didn't like. Because, you say, okay, we're into this. Here we go. Eddie, hit me with the solo and... What? That's it?
Yeah.
Aww.
Yeah, it's kind of like he's going a little slow at first, and then he goes, okay, here it goes, and then it's over.
Yeah.
Like, hey, man. I made a note here, perfect for the radio at the time, but maybe it doesn't age well. Maybe this is that late 80s period where some stuff was just too, and this is what, like, Martin and Christgau are getting into, like, it's too corporate. They're just going to sell millions, so they're trying to make it so they sell millions more. I don't know.
And maybe they worked it backwards, too. They said, we have to have you can do whatever you want, but we have to have a single.
Right.
Okay, well, it's got to be about love. There was a great Roth deal. I think he might have been talking to Joe Rogan, and he said, the difference is, you get the Sammy years with, why can't this be love? When it's love, ain't talking about love. Like, it definitely is. This is the shinier, happier Van Halen, not the nasty.
Yeah. And I get that. I mean, you can evolve as an artist. And, when you've got children, you don't sing about living in the gutter. When you've sold 40 million records, you don't live in the gutter anymore, dude. You live better than anybody who buys your records does. Right. So, and the video it wasn't quite black and white. It was kind of sepia-ish, and it's basically a performance video. But you get to see Sammy with his hair and everything. And
I was going to say, in the evolution of Sammy's hair, this was probably the best it was ever going to be.
Yeah. Longest, not too long.
Correct.
Yeah.
Just it looked like he had a rag, one of those
mops
on the top.
Yeah.
It's awesome looking.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, absolutely. So I'd give him credit. Look, number 1, mainstream rock.
Yeah.
Good for them. But, it's not one that's like, listen to Van Halen, make sure When It's Love is on there. That's just not what we're going to do. All right. But great, big hit. Now, AFU, Naturally Wired. When I first saw this, I figured, that's not all fired up. That's for all something else up, was my guess, right?
Unfortunately, you were wrong.
Knowing those guys. But this one kind of stands out a little bit. I don't know. What do you think of this one?
I like this one because the Al is out front at the beginning, laying down a nice groove, and then Eddie comes in with. Now we're not doing synth on this one. This is a real nice
rocker.
Yeah, correct. But like kind of updated though. It doesn't sound like this could have been off of 1984 or Diver Down or something. This is him taking another step forward on this.
Yeah, no, you're right. Big drums for Al at the beginning. Guitar's a little off kilter, but it's starting to get a little bit more like the old days. The riff is way heavier than the first two. Way. It's like, okay, finally we can hear that kind of good crunchy riff. And Mike is screaming along again. This actually opened quite a bit of the tour, this song. But what I thought was shocking was that the other song that they opened with, they were still doing There's Only One Way to Rock. Sammy's solo. First, yes. Eventually they changed it. It was There's Only One Way to Rock, which is how they opened 5150 tour.
Okay.
And then at some point they say, they switched it. It was There's Only One Way to Rock, and then eventually they switched it to All Fired Up. So this is a good, fun one to kind of kick off the show and get it going.
You do not want to be When It's Love. You
can't do it that. Yeah, exactly. But there's some real Ed magic on this solo. Like, this is really back to it. I'm like, it kind of stands out to me. On an album that has big hits that maybe are love songs and has a lot of synth in it, this one stood out to me. It's like, this is one I should appreciate more. Because if I haven't listened to this album much in the last 30 years, which I haven't, then this is what I'm missing. Because I know how Cabo Wabo goes. I know how When It's Love goes. I know how Finish What You Started goes. But this one I kind of forgot about. And this one's actually pretty darn good. Good Van Halen.
But again, it's one of those ones where you've forgotten about it, and then you comes on, you're like, oh, I like this one.
I remember this one.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, exactly. All right, but then that leads into Cabo Wabo, which is a fairly long song for the boys here. I mean, this is over 7 minutes long. Most of their songs are, and you go to Diver Down episode, they're all 3 minutes long. They're all around 4.5, 5.5 minutes leading up to this, but now this is over 7 minutes. So this is close to Sammy because he spent a lot of time down there in Cabo San Lucas.
It's hard to believe there was ever a time where Sammy was not associated with Cabo Wabo. But,
exactly.
This comes out, and from then on, that's his not whole identity, but it's a big part of his identity.
Absolutely. Cabo Wabo Cantina is a legendary place where all rockers, and Americans for that matter, just go down and party. He's got his tequila out of there, which is done extremely well. I think he's got some spin-off restaurants.
I think so. Yeah.
Cabo Wabo. So yeah, I mean, huge for Sammy. Maybe not for Eddie and Al after this. I mean, this is really a Sammy song if ever there was one, right?
So apparently at one point in time, Sammy took to wearing the Cabo Wabo t-shirts on stage. And then the Van Halen brothers said, we're going to have to ask you to stop that.
Is that right?
So Sammy said, no problem, guys. Team player. Goes down to the tattoo shop, gets Cabo Wabo on his arm, and then, a couple songs into the set, you roll up the sleeves because you're getting hot, and is that there? Oh, screw you guys. So, yeah, I think that was a sore subject for him, but I think at one point in time, at least Ed was in on that, wasn't he?
As an investor?
Yeah, I think so, and then he just said, buy me out, this isn't going anywhere, and then he really did.
Yeah, another bad decision by Ed. Maybe caused by alcohol or other things. But the song has just kind of become legend because it's about the cantina. But there's some good stuff in there.
Come on, let me take you down. I will show you all around. Down in Panama, let me take you down. Face down in Cabo, kissing the ground. Lands in, you have to see it.
They played it as an encore song on part of that tour. Some good O's and oohs during the chorus and stuff. Let me take you down. I will show you all around. Down in Cabo. That's what it is. All the rest of it still fades. Even though I just listened to it to get ready for this review, I'm like, you know what? That's the song for me. It's a 7-minute song, but for me, it's 30 seconds. Face down in Cabo, kissing the ground.
But I mean, it's what you want. It's Margaritaville. It's this, you live in a place where, I got to go to work every day. I got to get up. But, there's a place, it's far away, but I can dream about living that lifestyle, and you can actually go there.
Exactly.
The riff at the beginning is really cool.
It is. Cabo riff is good,
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, I know. It's crazy how you would think if they got in together and were going down to a place like this together on a regular basis, they'd still want to do it. Mikey still does.
Sure.
They're still buddies,
Absolutely.
right? In the Circle and in they're in another band together. Chickenfoot.
Now, it's interesting because in Chickenfoot, apparently Chad Smith was down in Cabo, and they said, Sammy, wants to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
Chad says, well, shit, he's the mayor here, so yeah, whatever you want.
See him.
Aye, Captain.
And that worked out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because the Red Hot Chili Peppers can't tour all the time. It's too big of a production. They have to stop sometimes,
Right.
Plus, I'm sure they make enough money doing what they do. Having a little side project is not the worst thing in the world. But let's see. Now that, if I'm not mistaken, is the end of side 1.
Okay.
Of course, I only had the CD. But the fifth song, Source of Infection, is another one that I completely forgot about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I was trying to get to the singles, because after that, there's a bunch of songs that are pretty popular and famous or whatever. And I guess this came from Eddie was with Valerie on there or something like that, and he got some kind of nasty bug or a virus or something, and that was the opening, or that was the inspiration from it. Cool opening.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhat of a Mean Streets kind of thing there from Ed.
Big one.
Cool. I think some great Ed work on this. Sammy is unnecessary on a lot of this.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just, hey, all right. It's
up and down, round and round. Okay. Yeah, basically he's there so that this is not an instrumental.
right, but it's almost like he's doing a Dave impersonation on this, but it's like he's making fun of him, too. And there's not a lot of lyrics on. There's like, hey, all right, and then Sammy's doing, whoa. I'm like, don't say whoa, shut up and let me hear what Ed's doing, man, Because he's talking over and around Ed's guitar work, and I'm like, that's not cool, man. Just, we're here to listen to Eddie. You can do your Where Eagles Fly song, and we'll listen to that. But, great Eddie on here, but Sam's just like, some of it he was just kind of throwing it in there, it sounded like to me.
Yeah, and unfortunately at this point in time, we've gotten away now from doing the Ed instrumental. There's no cathedral, there's no eruption or anything. They would come back on the next record to do 316, but there is no instrumental on this one. And to me, that's what this is. This is him yelling when they're trying to play.
When they're trying to do an instrumental, yeah, exactly. And of course 316 had been around
Right.
for many years. He just decided to lay it down on a record. But yeah, I'm with you there. It's like, life is a source of infection. And then it's just a bunch of screaming. I don't know. It's cool guitar work.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe an unfinished song, and Sammy's like, okay, look, I'll come in here and do my thing. I don't know. This is kind of a misfire on something that's got some killer Eddie Van Halen guitar work, so it's wasted.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm not going to go back and listen to this because the song sucks. Like, the guitar is good, but the song sucks.
Unless somehow you can take Sammy out of this mix.
Yeah, well, maybe they should work on that. Wolfie can work on that, yeah.
Because he's got nothing else to do.
Well, yeah, he's doing well. We're glad he's doing his own thing.
Absolutely.
He may want to take the bacon off the cheeseburger once in a while. I'm just saying, Wolf, you're a great instrumental, you're a great player. You don't need to be that heavy, buddy.
There wasn't there a story about how when they were doing the reunion tour and they were putting together a set list, and Wolf had put in, just brainstorming, had put in a Sammy song, and Dave was like, "What is this?" Nothing. Don't worry about that. I don't know what that song is.
Yeah, I don't know. Some roadie to that.
Yeah.
Well, no, I just saw on Twitter, besides Wolfgang temporarily changed his name to Wolfgang Led Zeppelin.
Correct.
Was that he was like, I don't know why the Sammy era doesn't get more respect. He was actually saying, look, there's some great songs on it, and you're absolutely right about that, Wolfgang. The critics like to come after it, and the hardcore, hard-rocking guys come after the Sammy era. But there's some great stuff absolutely throughout it. It's just like, this is one of those that's like, well, this is just a little bit of a misfire.
This track. Yes.
This track,
I
yeah.
would agree with you on that.
So let's move along to Feels So Good. So good. I mean, kind of simple in some ways. I believe it was the last of the 4 singles. Yeah, released in January 1989. I couldn't get any chart information on it, though. But I remember it. There was definitely a video for it.
Yeah.
That was pretty fun.
Correct. If we're talking about the video, have to have confession time here. I don't care how old I get. I will always be a sucker for the 1980s body glove bikini.
Nice.
Good times.
Yeah, so a little black and white in the background, a little color up front, so they're going between the different guys.
Mikey's mullet is on point in this one. Wow. Business in the front and party in the back.
Pretty nice. It looks like an Explorer bass, but not an old school, like a more new school one. Like not a Gibson Explorer. Well, a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what he was playing back then.
I don't either. Al, just one of the least attractive men in rock and roll.
You forget he actually has eyes.
Yeah. Kind of looks like a gorilla or some kind of an ape. He's kind of a weird looking dude. But yeah, it was probably, but again, it has some of that computerized chug at the beginning of it, no guitar again. And I'm like, Sucker in the 3-piece was the B-side. I always liked it, but note his lyrics are not real deep. They're obviously just about sex or something close to it, right? But hey, it's another feel-good song. Mm-hmm. And again, it fits with the times. It fit in fine in 88, 89. They were selling millions of records, but it's not one that you really come back to.
No, I wouldn't. The only reason that I like this song is because I remember it from back when it was first on the radio. Like, I don't think if I came to this now, I would have that much of a affinity for it.
And the solo's not bad. It fits. I would say it fits the song very well. But it's not earth-shattering. It's not like, this is going to be great. Oh, yeah, and he's back. Watch him go. Yeah, not so much. Yeah. But then on to the next song, Finish What You Started. Tell me about this song, because this is a big hit for them. Number 2 on the Rock Chart, number 13 on Billboard Hot 100. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What do you think about it?
Well, I think that at the time, they were living, I guess this was in Malibu, like one house away from each other. Mm-hmm. And I guess the guy that was living in the middle got so tired of them walking through his backyard and jumping the fence, he actually put fences in. Or not fences, but gates, so they could walk back and forth. Oh, that's nice of him. Yeah, so, I mean, how cool would that be? Hey, look, Eddie's in my backyard again. But he was probably some old guy, so he didn't care.
Right.
Apparently one night, Ed comes a knocking and says, hey, get up right now. It's 2:30 in the morning. But I guess that's when, like, your focus is music.
When it's happening, yeah.
Yeah, when it happens, it happens. And Sammy was in the middle of something and decided that he had to get out of the room and finish the song. What I like about this is Sammy actually plays the other part on this.
He does.
And I think it's the only one that he does on this record.
It's true. It's the only time, and I think he used a Gibson on it to play the other guitar piece on it. And after they worked out the music, then Sammy stayed up to write the lyrics. Okay, great. And it became a huge hit for them, right? Mm-hmm. I never liked this song.
Okay.
I never liked it back in the day.
Okay.
Because again, I'm looking for Ed to give me some killer riffs. And it's this country tonk, 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 tonk. I don't like country music much. And I'm like, this is a waste of Eddie Van Halen. I mean, I know he wrote the thing and he's proud of it. And it sold and it did really well. I see this live. I go get a beer, man. Because I don't like it.
All right.
I don't have to like it, and Sucker in a 3-piece is the B-side. So I'm like, and it's about you're getting to a certain point with a woman, and then it stops. Mm. And it's like, hey, come back here. We're not done. And at the time, well, I knew more about that than I knew about Feel So Good, I guess. As a teenager. I was more about, so it probably resonated more like that. So, hey, that's bullshit, man, so, yeah, and I still don't like it. I still don't like it. It's, when I think of Van Halen, I don't like that song. There are other songs on this record I would rather listen to than that. I know it was a huge hit, so they're going to play it every time, but still, I don't like it.
Well, that's what the skip button's for.
1, 2, 1, 2.
I know, but gee whiz, man. The other thing about Sammy is, I heard him on an interview. Who was it with? It'd be nice if I could cite it so that, we could have evidence of it and go back to it later. But so everyone got a solo. Alex will get a drum solo. Michael will get his boom, 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 crazy bass solo. Obviously, Ed has like the 7-minute guitar solo. And Sammy has a solo time where he comes out and does Where Eagles Fly or something like that, just with an acoustic guitar. He said that every time the other guys had a solo, he met up with a young lady and did his thing and got done in time to get back up on stage 3 times a night, every night.
And that's commitment right there.
It's
that
also
is dedication and commitment.
An energy level that, for a man in his 30s, I'm kind of impressed with. No doubt about it. Now, speaking of sex, the next song is Black and Blue.
Okay.
Which apparently was the first single, but didn't really do a whole lot of damage. And it's a blatant song about sex, because do it till we're black and blue is the kind of line there, right? But I'll tell you, it is heavier. I understand why it may have been an opening single, to say, hey, look, Van Halen's back and we're heavy still, because the riff is very EVH. Good harmonies, but the lyrics aren't super special. I mean, I guess it fits into the time.
Right. And, that's what you were selling too. You were selling the 3 times a night at backstage, underneath the stage, wherever that was. I wonder too if that, the record company said when it's love, they said no, it's black and blue, and then that falls flat. And
nope, it's when it's love.
I told you, put this other one out. The riff on this is cool. And then when the drums come in, it's heavy and it fits. But yeah, the lyrics are they're a little.
The lyrics maybe haven't aged very well. But look, 34 on the Hot 100, number 1 on album rock tracks. That's not mainstream rock, so I don't know where that comes from. Album rock tracks. I haven't heard that list a whole lot before. B-side was Apolitical Blues. But again, I remember we were all excited for Van Halen to come out with their new record. They got the cover, which is a little bit like, is that Meet the Beatles? Is that With the Beatles? When they're kind of black and white, but kind of shadowed on one side of their face. Oh, yep, there you go. Meet the Beatles. There you go. I distinctly remember being a young man and singing, do it till we're black and blue. And so, maybe it's just I'm too old. Maybe that's what it is.
I don't want to do that anymore. I got to get up tomorrow.
Exactly. I got to stretch out and stuff for that. And, So yeah, maybe the album that isn't what hasn't aged well. It's that the Wolf here hasn't aged very well, and there's probably plenty of people to tell you that.
Hey guys, this is Chris from My Rock and Roll Heaven, and you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London podcast.
Now the last song, well, it's not the last song on the CD, but the last song on the cassette and the vinyl was "Sucker in a 3-Piece." The song is better than I remember it, but I didn't get the premise. I'm like, why are you even singing about those people for? Why are you singing about business people back in the day? I'm like, why even waste your time? Because it has some good riffs. It has some good Van Halen guitar magic. The drums are killer on it, and it's basically about he's talking to a girl who should be with him, but instead she's going to sell out for, a suit for an older guy with some money, which is a very common tale. He's trying to convince her, that's not what you want. You want me. And now I'm like, well, yeah, of course you want Sammy, not some dude in a suit. But at the time, I didn't really get it. I didn't really get the song. And I just didn't like the title. Sucker in a 3-Piece.
No, and it's tough too because, like I said, this is a long record. You're kind of out of gas now when you're listening to this last. I mean, I understand this isn't technically the last track on the record, but this is long and it's good, but you've been through a lot at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think they did play it here. Hold on, let me get my average set list from that tour. They played it some. They played it 10 times on tour, so they tried it. It didn't seem to work, I guess, and then they kind of ditched it. Interesting that they closed with Rock and Roll from Led Zeppelin.
Huh.
I mean, they've always done covers, and look,
Yeah.
it makes sense. They do You Really Got Me.
Mm-hmm.
That's a cover, yeah, but it was on their first album, and it's kind of part of Eruption almost. But they wouldn't do Jump, but they did Rock and Roll. That's interesting on that tour. Anyway, then you get to Apolitical Blues. Now, again, this was kind of a bonus track if you bought the CD instead of the cassette or the LP. It was a B-side. And I don't know, do you know a lot of Little Feat?
I mean, I know Dixie Chicken. I know
Right.
Let It Roll. But
Yeah.
no, not a ton of stuff. No. I know they're one of those bands that, like, they've got a big cult following.
Mhm.
Like people like, no, they're the great. And I think they were really great musicians. I just don't think they had a ton of radio hits.
Might have been what it was.
Yeah.
Maybe they toured well, but, whatever, the records didn't sell really
Right.
well. And so,
But if you
other
know-
musicians know them.
Correct.
Yeah.
If you know music, you love Little Feat.
Yeah. And obviously they've always done some covers,
Mhm.
so they figure, all right, if you're going to buy the CD, let's throw in the B-side. And I guess both Ted Templeman and Don Landy had recorded Little Feat's version of the
Okay.
song. So they're pretty familiar with it. So they could run it kind of the same way for the boys here. It's cool because you don't hear slide guitar from Eddie,
No.
like
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah. And you figure that, I mean, I don't have a problem thinking that he could play that.
Yeah,
I mean, he probably grew up listening to blues music, but it's just something you don't hear from him.
exactly. So I give them some credit that it's different. It's different from everything they've kind of done before.
Mhm.
It's different from everything else on the album. And it's a blues number. They're not really a blues band. And it's even got a little piano from Ed. I assume that's Ed on the piano.
Yeah, I looked here. There isn't anybody else credited
With piano or
with
keys.
anything else other
Yeah.
than the band. So yes, I would imagine that's him.
Yeah. So, honestly, I don't think I got this far after the
It's a
first listen
long record.
back in the day. Seriously, yeah. I mean, Diver Down's 31 minutes. This is almost double, or about that. So, and there's so many other things on there that are good. Plus, like I was talking to Uncle Steve from Uncle Steve Iron Maiden Zone the other day. What happens to me a lot of times, because he's like, okay, then Brave New World comes out. What did you think of it? I'm like, well, I liked it. But then after 2 listens, I want to go back and listen to Peace of Mind. He's like, all right, then, A Matter of Life and Death comes out. What did you think? Well, I liked it. But after 2 listens, I go back and listen to, Somewhere in Time, because it's like I know the band and I want to hear stuff that I know from the band.
Yeah.
So after I listen to all this and I suffer through, if I made it through Sucker in a 3-piece, I'm probably not going to listen to this. I give them credit for doing something different.
Well, my telephone is ringing. It told me it was jamming now.
It's definitely a B-side for them. But apparently it's one that they liked because they did play it when we saw them play in Orlando in 1991, which is shocking to me, honest to God.
I don't think they played. Where is it? They only played it twice.
They only played it twice. This is
Yeah.
the 5150 tour.
Oh, okay.
They only played it twice on the 51. Oh, no, this is a OU812. Okay. So they only played it twice on that tour. But when we saw them on Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, they did
Mm-hmm.
play it. They only played it 5 times. So we kind of got a rare track there. They only played it twice. The previous tour, they only played it 5 times on this tour. Or on that tour, I should say, on Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. But they played When It's Love on the tour we saw. Apolitical Blues, Finish What You Started, and that's it. And they brought Jump back. Finally, Sammy realized, I guess I have to sing Jump, even though I don't really want to. But, on average, they played a ton of this on the OU812 tour, right? They played AFU. They played Black and Blue. They played Cabo Wabo basically every night. Finish What You Started. Mine All Mine. I would have loved to see that one. When It's Love, of course. And then they did Sucker in a 3-piece a few times, So they still played a ton of it. Whereas I feel like once they got to Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, I mean, look, they played 1, 2, 3. I guess we could name them: Pound Cake, Judgment Day, Run Around, Pleasure Dome.
Best of both worlds.
Dream is over on top of the world.
Mm.
So they were still doing a lot of stuff from the new record, and which was the case, but it seemed like they did a little bit more on the OU812 tour. But anyway, as far as this goes in the Pantheon of Van Halen, and let's say there's 10 records. There's the 6 with Dave, and there's 4 with Sammy.
Okay.
No greatest hits, no live albums.
Right.
Whereabouts would you rank it?
This is pretty low, to be honest with you. If you're talking about the rest of them, because I mean, I like 5150 is going to be over this, absolutely.
Yep.
And I think pretty much all the Dave records. Yeah, just because that's the Dave records were the classic. When you say Van Halen,
I know.
That's what I think of. Like, it's not that I don't like 5150. It's not that I don't like this record. That's classic Van Halen to me.
I know, yeah. And you put Unlawful Carnal Knowledge over it would be my guess.
Correct. Yes.
So that's 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
Over balance.
Yeah. I think this probably was a case of, like they were saying, they were trying to almost correct too much to be more, we can sell 10 million records again, like they did with 1984.
Right. Well, and 6 million is no, small feat or no little feat either. But, 4 million on this one compared to 6 million on the previous one. And it didn't go double, triple platinum in Canada like it usually does. It doesn't go double, triple platinum in Australia or some other places. So it's like maybe the wheels are starting to come off of here a little. Although they had big hits and they did the big tour. Didn't they do the Monsters of Rock tour with like Metallica and Scorpions and Dokken?
I think so, yeah.
In 88, that would have been on the backs of this record. Metallica, Scorpions, Dokken, Kingdom Come, I think.
They were, from what I'm looking at this poster, they were the headline.
Absolutely they were.
Van Halen, Scorpions, Dokken. Metallica's so far down.
I know.
And then Kingdom Come.
Yeah.
Metallica, they won't be as big as Dokken. No way.
Exactly. James Hetfield's no Don Dokken, that's for sure. Jeez. That's one that might have been fun to see. At the time, I probably wasn't that interested because I didn't really know Metallica until one came out.
Right.
Kingdom Come, although they're from Louisville, or at least some of them were, all you ever heard about Kingdom Come was Led Zeppelin clone.
Yes.
And I didn't really know Dokken that well. Now, Scorpions, Van Halen, that's pretty cool. But considering there's so many festivals like this and big tours like this now, it's kind of ahead of their time. And then, so in comparison to For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, it says 3 million. It actually went down. I would have said that was even better because they did have big hits off of it. I think the singles may have done better on Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. And obviously the live album then did pretty well. But yeah, you're starting to see the numbers come down. And to be honest with you, Balance was the first Van Halen album I didn't buy when it came out.
And even though that didn't sell that well, I take that back. It wasn't that bad. It sold more than I thought it would. Yeah, I don't have that record either. Because that was, how much was that? That right here, right now is
93. And then Balance is 95. So, but see, we had kind of grown up at that point. At that point, We're graduating from college. And
let's see what the sales are on this.
About the
3
same.
million. So, and that's crazy because Right Now was huge.
Huge hit.
Yeah.
Top of the World was a nice hit for him. Pound Cake was a fun way to open it.
Yeah.
But Right Here, Right Now was all over MTV, man. It was all over MTV. And they basically named the album, the live album. It's live right here, right now, So, that surprises me a little bit.
I didn't think there was any way they would sell 3 million copies. And I would have thought that OU812 sold a little better than that and For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. But you're right. At that point in time, that was not what was in vogue anymore.
I wonder, Balance is last of those 10 for me.
Mm-hmm.
What could I put under it? I don't love Van Halen 2.
Put Van Halen 3 under it.
Yeah, that doesn't make the list, dude. That doesn't even make the list.
It should never have been.
Oh, man. I wouldn't even buy that album for target practice. And I shouldn't say that because I haven't listened to it all the way through. And Fire in the Hole wasn't a horrible song. But, I don't want to like it, and therefore I don't. Yeah, I couldn't put... Okay, 5150 is better than it. 5150 is pretty damn good, actually.
Yeah.
Put it as the best of the Sammy records. I put For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge ahead of it. Obviously, 1984, the first album, go ahead of it. I just like Diver Down better, even though it's got a ton of covers on it and it's very short. So that leaves Women and Children first, Fair Warning, and Van Halen 2. Fair Warning, I mean, it's got Unchained on it.
Yeah.
So
I love Fair Warning.
So you can't
Yeah.
put that below it. Women and Children First got Everybody Wants
I
Some.
know, that's the problem.
Maybe I could put Van Halen 2 under it, but I doubt it. I bet if I listened to them right next to each other, I would still go with Van Halen 2. I think you're right.
so.
It's at best it's 8th out of 10,
Mhm.
but I'm guessing it's 9th, and it's not bad. It's not bad.
Which one?
This one, OU812.
No, it's not. It's just it struggles in a catalog of really great records.
Yeah, but now that Eddie's gone, here's the other thing, because I talked about this before at the beginning, how Van Halen, we had them in such high esteem, top 5 favorite bands or whatever. Now I wouldn't put them in my top 10. I probably wouldn't put them in my top 20 or top 25. They have fallen that far off. In parts because from Van Halen 3 on, how much new music did they ever make?
Okay, so all right. So if you want to go that route, they did. When did they put out that greatest hits record?
97?
97.
Six,
So
something?
that had 2 new tracks from Dave on it.
You know, Me Wise Magic, which has got the syntax of Yoda.
Can't Get This Stuff No More. And then so after that, it was the Brand New Truth.
A different kind of truth.
Different kind of truth. That's right.
Yeah.
And that was all new. I mean, that there was a big gap there, and then that was it.
Right, yeah.
Was there something new off of this one, Best of Both Worlds?
It's About Time
Okay.
was a Sammy song.
Okay.
Up for Breakfast and Learning to See were Sammy songs.
Right.
So they threw those in there. Because, see, they got back together with Dave
Right.
to do a few songs on the, hey, I'm back. And they're like, nope, you're still a wackadoo, you're out. So now we go get Gary Sharon.
Correct.
The fans don't accept that.
Mm-mm.
So he's out.
Mm-hmm.
Then we're like, okay, we'll get Sammy back again. And I saw them on that tour, and they were great. And everybody was happy for a minute or two.
Until they weren't.
Yeah. And it was like, all right, Van Halen's back. Like, no, okay, well, now we have to get Dave back. So it's like they have 2 greatest hits albums, one with new Dave songs, one with new Sammy songs. Nobody really wants any of those songs. Then, yeah, you got the Different Kind of Truth, which it has some new songs, but it also has some stuff that had been laying around for a while, right?
Uh-huh.
Like Bullethead had been around since like the 70s or
Yeah.
something like that. And maybe Chinatown, I can't remember. I remember Tattoo came back and like, oh, cool, it's Dave and Van Halen. We haven't heard this in 30 years. Isn't it great? Yeah, it's, Honey Baby Sweetie Doll. And like, that's Dave's song. I don't have to listen to it to know. Look at that title, man. You know that. Stay Frosty, Beats Working. Yeah, I mean, the time had passed.
Right.
So all that time, and it's disappointing that Eddie never did more, and it's just sad because everyone's like, it'd be great if Eddie did a solo album, and Eddie's like, well, I do all the music anyway, so why do I need to?
Right.
Like, but you need to do something besides sit around drinking all day.
I think part of his problem too is that he was so prolific that after a while it's like, well, that's not as good as your first record.
Mm.
Okay, but it's new. I think that's the problem with a lot of guys like this is you get to the point where you're like, I don't even want to do anything new because I know you're gonna
hate on it. Yeah. So all right. So I saw him 4 times. I saw him before I saw him with you on that tour on the Unlawful Carnal Knowledge tour in Indianapolis. Then we saw him in Orlando together.
Yeah.
Then I saw him when they got back with Sammy in the 2000s for a while.
Okay.
And then I saw him with Dave and Wolfie. And I remember I used to be a big reviewer for Ticketmaster. I would always go in there and review, and they would usually post my stuff. And at one time I was a top 50 Ticketmaster reviewer. I'm like, oh, look at me. I'm a big reviewer. I submitted it. And usually I give you 5 out of stars, maybe 4 if it wasn't perfect. I gave them a 3 out of 5 and said that Kool and the Gang, who opened for them, was actually better than they were. And they did not post my review. So I don't know if Dave was in charge of that or what. But, they didn't go out with a bang. They kind of just went away.
Yeah, I did not get to see them live on that tour, but I have seen videos posted of it. And yeah, Dave everybody else was great.
Mm-hmm.
Wolf can hold his own.
Yeah.
But Dave just didn't. He had the moves, he had the stories, but the voice was it just wasn't there.
And he's not just the hair club president. He's also a client. Which is tough when you're known for having this beautiful blonde mane.
Yeah.
And now you've got this Donald Trump comb over going. It's like, oh, Dave.
No one believes that.
Dave. And now he's retired, I do believe. He was supposed to maybe do like a Vegas
I think
thing. And he's like, nah, I think it's time to wrap it up. So Dave's done. Eddie's not with us anymore. Alex can't really tour on his own.
No.
So, go see Sammy in the Circle. Let's have a Van Halen. They'll do some Van Halen tunes.
Looking forward to the new Mammoth. record.
Always.
Yeah.
That's coming out soon, yeah?
Mm-hmm. I think so. There's a single out now, but yeah, it's ready to drop soon.
Well, that wraps our take on episode number 124 of The Ugly American Werewolf in London on Van Halen's OU812 from 1988. God, I can't believe it's been 35 years since that came out, And while we didn't give it a glowing, huge review, I mean, I think we both liked the album a lot. We both have fond memories of it from high school. And it just kind of hit at the same time that I was discovering the back catalog of Van Halen. Like we said, we knew Van Halen from 1984, from the early days of MTV, when we were young men just finding about rock and roll music. Then they had the change with Sammy from Dave in 86's 5150. But more importantly than them coming out with OU812 was our discovery of the first album, and Eruption, and Ain't Talking About Love. That was happening at the same time. So it's kind of a balance between this old school heavy metal, the Dave years that we're really just discovering, and now the pop years. Yes, very popular all over MTV, selling well, doing the huge Monsters of Rock tour that they're headlining, but it's a little bit different. And yeah, we ranked it 9th out of 10 on our Van Halen album scale. Well, that just shows you how strong the Van Halen catalog is overall. Not really the weakness of this record. I liked it. I like rediscovering some of the songs that I had forgotten about. The pop songs are still pretty catchy for the most part, even though I don't listen to them much anymore. I still like them, and they still hold a special place in my heart just because of the time it came out, where I was in my life, and where I was on my discovery of music and Van Halen at that point. And of course, you can't get this stuff no more, so we have to appreciate what we do have. And as usual, folks, we want to know, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? Did we leave out your favorite part? You've got to let us know. Please email us. It's uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com. Let us know the shows that you want us to do on the bands, the concerts, the albums, the DVDs, the stuff that you want to hear about. We're always open to suggestion. And you got to follow us on Twitter at ugly_werewolf or at actionjack72. You can tweet us, you can DM us, let us know what's up with you. We're on Instagram, Ugly American Werewolf in London. I think we're kind of also on Facebook. We're trying to do better on social media all the time, and we really appreciate all of our followers. You can follow us on YouTube even. But what would be huge for us is if you're thinking about it, please write us a positive review. Those 5-star reviews are what help us find more rock and roll fans like you wherever you are all over the world. And it's anywhere you get your podcast, really. Apple is still huge. Spotify is still huge. But Apple's probably the biggest one. So if you're enjoying the show, hey, please do me a favor. Take a minute, say something nice about us, and hey, we might just read it on the show. Thanks as always to Pantheon, of which we are a proud member of the network. Go to pantheonpodcast.com to check out all of our friends on there. We just signed up a bunch of new ones, some of whom you may be familiar with, so definitely check out pantheonpodcast.com to see who's new. And of course, thank you as always to rarevinyl.com, our amazing sponsor, where if you use the code podcast, you can save 10% off your orders. They ship all over the world. So you're looking for that old school Van Halen stuff in pristine condition, go to rarevinyl.com, folks. Use the code podcast. Next week, we're talking about one of my favorite bands of all time, a UK band, but this one didn't have limited success anywhere. They were huge all over the world, especially in 1985-86, and that was Dire Straits. It's been 45 years since they released their debut album, which of course included the hit single Sultans of Swing, one of the biggest rock tunes in the Wolf's personal history of rock tunes. And so Jackson and I are going to dive deep into that next week. But until then, all you rock and rollers, all of you all around the world, be cool and stay safe.